Well, welcome to today's event, and thanks to Tim for organizing these regular meetups. I do believe that there's a big reason why all of you are here today, and that reason is to get engaged with the community and get in touch with people and start building your support system. And we're going to discuss in a little bit why that is extremely, extremely important. So I'm super happy that you came out in person. I think we all need some more in-person interaction this year after all the pandemic stuff we've been through. So it's definitely fun to see human faces in person. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about transitioning to the world of startups. Okay, so I have some good news for all of you. Regardless of the fact whether you have a startup, plan to have a startup, work for a startup, or look for a job, the content that I'm going to be talking about today is going to be very applicable to each and every single one of you for one good reason. And that reason is that there is a huge amount of similar principles and similar frameworks that apply to building a startup and looking for a job. And I don't mean any job, I mean a job that you truly want, deserve, that is going to make you happy, that you're going to feel fulfilled by, so all of those great things. How do I know that? Because ironically, or maybe not so ironically, my background combines both things. So for the past 7 years, I was career coaching. So every single day I was working with job seekers who didn't know how to land great jobs. So all the questions that were related to how do I write a great resume? How do I get recruiters to write me on LinkedIn? How do I find a job in a company I really want? What happens if I don't get a job offer after the interview? So all of those things, I was working with people on those every single day. Until last year, I transitioned to coaching startup founders in building their businesses, specifically tech businesses. So not any kind of business, but the business that has a scalable tech component. So with that in mind, I realized how much, obviously those are two very different worlds and there are very different people that you meet every single day, but there is an exceptional amount of similarities going on between these two worlds. So the intersection between these two worlds is indeed huge. So before we go there, I'm going to tell you a couple things about myself that are not related necessarily to what I do today or what I did yesterday and 3 months ago. So, hi, I'm Anna, and I'm not going to say that I'm an alcoholic, but, you know, who knows. But I am scared of failure. I've been scared of failure my whole life. It's something that was definitely one of my pet peeves, and I didn't know how to handle failure properly. I always thought that failure is simply not an option. And yet, I failed a surprising number of times. First, I thought that it was a great idea to sell artisan bags through an e-commerce website. Turns out it's not a great idea. Then I thought that it was a great idea to build a digital marketplace with different resources for job seekers and different people in general who are motivated by their career development and career planning. Again, not a great idea. That business totally failed. Finally, I did not fail at one thing, and that thing was building my own career coaching business and getting recognized in the career coaching industry, even though I had no career coaching background whatsoever. So I entered a brand new industry. Full disclosure, I did have some recruitment expertise, so I wasn't completely useless, but definitely not an expert in the career coaching space of any kind. And yet, in 7 years, I somehow noticed myself in the list of industry leaders, and I was invited to different conferences to speak, and I was considered a thought leader in the space, in the community, in the industry. How that happened, I still don't know. I mean, I know, and I also don't know, but it did happen. So that was the one thing that I did not fail at. Hopefully, Platform Calgary will be the second one that I don't fail at. Yet to be established. And through all of those experiences and all of those milestones, I realized one thing. I already knew that thing because we all hear these inspiring quotes every single day, motivational pep talks and all of that stuff. But until you live through it, you don't quite understand what it means. So now I know that it's actually better to regret trying something and failing at it than not trying it at all. And so for those of you who either are planning a startup, have a startup, or maybe think that, oh my God, I think I'm not the type of person who could ever build a startup. Like, what do I have to offer this world that can be called a startup? Trust me, until you try it, you'll never know. There are people doing miraculous things every single day, and they don't necessarily have all the experience and all the knowledge for that, and yet they figure things out. If they can do it, you can do it too. So that was one of the main lessons that I learned, and that is why I believe that talking about startup world and understanding what that world is actually all about is super useful for every single one of you, regardless of where you're at today and what kind of things you're planning for the future. I'm sorry to the wonderful lady who just arrived. Hello. That's okay. I was just going to invite you to sit a little bit closer to the front because we're going to do some activities that will require for all of us to be a little bit closer than that kind of distance. Thank you. So, enough about me. Now, I actually want to learn about you. So what I want every single one of you to do right now, if you need to take notes, you can. If you can just keep that all in your head, that's fine too. If you want to take those notes on your phone, doesn't matter to me. As long as you come up with 3 facts about yourself. What kind of facts? The first fact, something simple. As simple as, hey, I'm Anna, I work at Platform Calgary as a startup advisor. Your current role. Maybe your previous role, if, for example, you lost your job recently, or you're in between jobs and you are transitioning, or you're planning something else like a new career path or something like that. So one simple fact, don't need to reinvent the wheel here, really. The second fact, we can call it the wow fact. And by wow, I don't mean that it needs to be something groundbreaking and absolutely astonishing. It's enough for that fact to be a little bit unconventional, a little bit non-traditional, a little bit not something that people usually expect. Some examples of that might involve things like, I'm a career coach, but I actually got my education in economics and finance, and I thought that I'd be working in a bank. Or maybe you are a designer who loves a certain type of paintings. Anything really that is a little bit outside the box, and even if it's something that you might consider as an insecurity. So for a lot of you, you might be hiding something about your background, thinking, well, that's not what big companies expect to hear in a job interview, so I better not say it. So we're not in a job interview, great news. So some of those contradictory or unconventional facts might actually be very useful for you today. And the third fact, something about how you add value to other people. So for example, if you're a graphic designer that works with small businesses, your adding value statement could be, I help small businesses create amazing imagery for their websites. Done. Or if you're a photographer, I help capture amazing family moments for young families in Calgary. So how you help other people, how you add value to other people. Okay? So we're going to give it a couple minutes, and I want every single one of you to think of those 3 facts. Spoiler alert, if you don't think of them, or you think that you don't need to do it, and you'll just wait until the 3 minutes are over. So with that, I want to talk to you today about understanding whether the startup life could be something that is the right fit for you. Because my objective today is not to tell you that every single one of you should have or should build a business and should build a tech startup. That's not the goal. Most likely, most of you shouldn't, really, for various reasons. But my objective for today is to help you evaluate whether A, that is something that might be attractive and might be interesting for you. And if not, then my objective would be to share principles with you that would apply exactly the same way to your job search strategies. So surprisingly enough, as I mentioned in the beginning, There are a lot of similarities. So based on the conversations I have with startup founders every single day, I can tell you one thing. If you're thinking about building a startup or joining a startup, working for a startup, just because startup sounds cool, don't do it. It's not worth it. Too many things might go wrong, too risky, and all those other things that come with the word startup. So it's not that, American dream or whatever, it's not at all like that. It's not those glamorous Insta posts where people are like, 10 things I learned by building my own business. So that's not it, okay? Startup life is hard. Working for a startup can be hard as well. There's a lot of uncertainty, there's chaos, there are no processes, you're figuring stuff out a lot of the times, you're building stuff on the go, so it's a lot of moving pieces. But if you find a problem that is worth solving, that changes everything. Because then you're not building a startup for the sake of building a startup, you're solving a real problem that people struggle with. And by struggle, I don't mean that it needs to be something so complex and so devastating. By struggle, I mean maybe people don't like spending time on certain things. Or maybe they wish certain things were done a certain way. Or maybe they wish certain things were a little bit cheaper or a little bit different. So all of those are problems. And if you find the right one for you, the right one for your customer, then that's a journey worth embarking on. But I can tell you for absolute sure, I've worked with entrepreneurs outside of tech, I work with entrepreneurs in tech, and people who go into building a business or building a startup for the sake of building a startup or a business don't usually do that well. Some of them do. There are always some unicorns that manage to figure stuff out as they go. But let's face it, that's the minority. So don't look for a startup idea, but rather find a problem worth solving. Then you will be motivated by finding a solution. And that is a super, super exciting journey. The second biggest principle has to do with your customer versus your product. A lot of the founders I talk to fall in love with the product. What do I mean by that? It means that you're working on that product, you're investing a lot of time. So let's say you're building a platform that verifies achievements of people that they mention on their resume. And you believe that that is a real problem, like people lie on their resumes. So you're like, hey, I can come up with a solution to verify whether they're actually telling the truth. And then you invest your time, you invest money, you invest effort, you look for the right people, you need a developer, you need a marketing person, you need this or that. That by the end of it, you're like, hey Anna, why is nobody buying from me? Question is, do your customers feel the exact same way about the problem as you do? Or have you completely lost track of where your customer's at by falling in love with what you're building? That is a very common trap for business people, for entrepreneurs, for even bigger companies. Why do some big companies fail with certain projects or certain initiatives? Because they get too hung up on running the initiative for the sake of running the initiative, or they're so proud of the initiative that they're running, but they forget about the person who actually wants that initiative, okay? So please, please fall in love with your customer and not your product. And that may sound very like, yeah, of course, sure, makes sense. But in fact, that means that when you have to face a harsh reality, that you've invested dozens of hours, if not thousands of hours into something. You've dreamt about it, you've lost your sleep about it, but people don't want it and they're not buying it. The harsh reality is you have to let it go and you have to pivot into something else. That could be a spin-off of what you were building already, or it could be something completely new. When I had my own career coaching business, well, technically I still do, what I was never able to understand is why do people not want a comprehensive approach to their career development? Why is no one buying the service of comprehensive, in-depth career coaching, skills assessment, things like that? Why is everybody willing to pay just write me a resume? I could never understand. To me, as someone who has been on the other side of the table, who has recruited people, who has screened resumes, It made no sense. Because, okay, you secure this one job. What next? What comes next? What are you going to do next? Do you actually know your strength? Do you actually know who you want to be in 5 years? Do you actually know how to market your competitive advantage? But people don't want that. People want resumes. And because I was in love with the product more than I was in love with my customer, it was hard for me to accept. So I made money doing resumes or optimizing resumes for people, dreaming of clients who understand the value of career development. Full disclosure, there are some people who do. I'm not going to say that it's a complete desert, but it's 0.000 something percent of the entire population of my market. So a little bit of a personal story of how that manifested in my own life. Also, whenever you're either looking for a job or building a startup, you need to know who you are. There is a reason why all of those Greek philosophers like Aristotle and all these other super smart guys always talked about know thyself. Like they actually, meant something. So what they meant is when you don't know what you bring to the table, and that includes not only things you're great at, but also things that you're not so great at, then you cannot find the right job for you, or you cannot build a successful startup. So you need to know your strengths, your weaknesses, and most importantly, your blind spots. Your blind spots could actually trick you in a couple different ways. So as a job seeker, your biggest blind spot is how other people see you versus how you see yourself. And a lot of the times you're underestimating how other people are seeing you. You think that you have nothing special. You think that you don't really stand out. You think that you are not in control by pretty much hoping, oh my God, maybe this awesome company will give me a chance and we'll just see how amazing I am. When in fact, that amazing company could be struggling to find a person like you. And it's taken them months and months of going through the wrong people to finally see the right skill set, the right personality fit, and all of those things. So all this time, you could have been saying, hey, yes, I am out of a job, but I bring a ton of value. Let me just show you and tell you a little bit about the value I can bring to your business. The same thing with a startup. Basically, there are a few different skill types, and I mean, for those of you who are, into like personality assessments and all these tests, like there are a whole bunch of different classifications. But in the startup world, we're basically splitting people or classifying people into 3 main groups. There are hackers, there are hustlers, and there are hipsters. So hackers, the tech people, right? So the engineers, the inventors, the tech brain power of this world. The hustlers, the sales, marketing. So how do we talk to people? How do we build those relationships? Networking events, contracts, all that stuff, deals, handshaking. So those are hustlers. And hipsters are the designers of this world. So how do I make this website better? How do I make this pretty? How do I make this user-friendly? What color is this button? Why is it not that color? So those are the designers of this world. And it does not necessarily mean that you always fall into just one category. You could combine multiple skill sets. But it's very important to recognize. So for example, I'm a hustler, not a hacker in any kind of way, maybe a little bit of a hipster at times, but not enough to have that skill set. So I'm very well aware of the fact that if I were to build a business, I need another perspective. I need a tech skill set of an inventor, of an engineer, but in return, that inventor and that engineer needs me, because the inventors of this world usually forget about that connection to the customer and fall in love with their product a lot more easily. And hustlers like us, we're like, hello, where's the money? Who's gonna buy this? How do we market this? How do we explain to people that they need it? All of those important questions. So if you were to ever build a startup, or if you work in a startup, if you understand who you are and what you bring to the table, you also start to understand what other people bring to the table and how you can build a better team, how you can work better in the same team. So knowing yourself and your blind spots, super, super important. Same thing with job searching. Whenever you have an idea, same with finding a job, when you believe that your resume needs to look a certain way, or you believe that you need a certain type of work environment. And in the startup world, if you have an idea and you're like, yes, I need to build this platform that does this. The one thing that you can never do too much of is testing and validating. So the number one rule of the startup world, as well as the job searching world, test, 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 and then test some more. Because again, you never know all of the blind spots that you and your team have. You never know what companies truly are looking for. You never know what goes on behind the closed doors. So you need to test every single assumption. At the point where I think of something, I think I deserve a job in an oil and gas company. That's nothing more than an assumption. I need to test it. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. People need a platform that verifies achievements on other people's resumes. Assumption. Test it and validate it. And what's the best way to validate different kinds of assumptions, whether they are about a startup or about yourself? Talking to people. That's the only pretty much way to test. You can do a lot of other things. You can ask for feedback. You can survey people. You can do a lot of other things. But they will never be a good enough substitute for actual conversations. So actually putting the other person first and you putting yourself in the shoes of that other person. So when they talk about that ultimate empathy, for those of you who are job seekers today or actively looking for work, I highly encourage you to think of it this way. It's very easy to see the companies who have the power to hire you as the bad guys. The guys that take too long to reply to my email. The guys that don't follow up after an interview for 2 weeks. My God, those recruiters that never call me back. So it's very easy to fall into that trap. But when you are a recruiter and you're getting hundreds of those emails that are not even addressed to you properly with the wrong name, and you're even not the right person to answer that question, you're like, oh my freaking God. It's a whole other story. Same with your startup. If you think that, oh, it's just that my customer doesn't understand how genius my invention is because it will take me 3 hours to explain the amazing technology that I built, first in its class. Really? Are they that dumb? Or maybe are you so great at explaining? So always, always show ultimate empathy to the other person, and you'll be surprised how much stress it actually takes off of you. Because we sometimes place so much stress onto ourselves, but the opposite side of that same coin is too much importance on ourselves as well. So I challenge every single one of you to think, hey, can I actually help this company hire me? Maybe they haven't heard me right. Maybe I haven't showed them in all the possible ways how I can add value to their business. Maybe I actually did talk too much about myself in that interview. So test, 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 and then test some more. Same thing again. If you are job searching, you're selling a product. Any guesses what the product is when you're job searching? Yes, you are the product. When you're selling a business or a business idea, what is the product? Yes, it is the same. Because you can, yes, your product, if you build a product, it could exist kind of independently. It could be recognized first as a product. But the truth is, especially when you're starting out and you're not Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, even those guys, they drive most of their success through their personal brand. So people trusted Steve Jobs. They bought him, and he sold him and his vision, and also Apple products together with that. So when you're job searching, you're selling yourself, and that means you're selling your skills, your background, your experience, your knowledge, your strengths and weaknesses, but also your personality, and all those different qualities and personal characteristics that you have. And that's an important thing too, because a lot of companies struggle with finding the right people who would actually stick around. The turnover is insane in a lot of companies, sometimes through no fault of their own, or just through the fault of them not being able to screen people properly. To be fair, yes, there are companies that create an environment that promotes that turnover, for sure. But it's on them. We're not here to fix them, okay? We cannot control what they do, but we can control what you do. That's the only thing you can control. You can control what you do, and you can influence what you do. So, if you're marketing yourself or your product to everyone, you're marketing to no one. So, for those of you who are job searching, have you ever found yourself thinking, I want any kind of job? Well, okay, maybe not McDonald's, but like within my industry or within my specialty, any kind of job. No? Nobody did that? Okay, a few people, thank God. I was like, my strategy just failed. I'm scared of failure, you guys, okay? Okay, so the truth is you need to find your market. In the case of your startup, that would be your early adopters, the people who would get most excited about what you're actually building. In the case of your job search, your type of company. Maybe your type of company is smaller or bigger. Maybe your type of company is the company that values certain things over other things. So you cannot target everybody. Those LinkedIn profiles that are like, open to work. What kind of work? Or all of those requests that I get from people that are like, hey Anna, help me find a job. And I have all the sympathy in the world for the situation, don't get me wrong, we've all been there. But seriously, what kind of job? What do you bring to the table? How can I help you? Help me help you. That applies to everything you do literally. So a lot of the times we usually underestimate the importance of communicating things to people. So it's not obvious to the employer that you want a certain thing or don't want a certain thing. And it's not obvious to your customer that you're building a certain thing and not the other thing. So it's important to communicate those things and never ever assume that people just get it. Maybe they do, but test whether they actually do or not. So the number one rule of finding what you actually want, be it a job, a startup idea, a product, whatever, a team, is understanding who your target audience is. And as counterintuitive as that may be, if you make your target audience larger, you're actually decreasing your odds of success. What happens is you get diluted in the crowd of people who are also doing the exact same thing. And you're fighting for 0% of the big pie when you could have 100% of the smaller pie. I don't know about you, but I'd much rather have 100% of a smaller pie. And unfortunately, that is not like, it might be okay to understand, but when it comes to executing, a lot of people forget that. I've seen that time and time again when people are like, I'm not happy with my job. My question, what do you want? Anything but not this. I get that, people get frustrated, but what is anything? Or like just today, I was evaluating an application for a startup and they are building an app that delivers food. And so the question was, who is the type of customer who is most likely to buy your product? The answer, everybody who eats. As much as I understand, and I had a lot of fun with that, like that kind of made my day and turned into an internal joke, but with that approach, that app is not going to be successful. So I'm glad that they are applying to platform to figure it out and to understand that not everybody who eats is their target market. It's the larger market, but within that market, there's a certain segment that already loves Uber Eats and is not willing to switch from there no matter what you offer them. And a bunch of other alternatives. So if you're marketing to everyone, you're marketing to no one. The most important, arguably the most important thing in a startup journey, as well as a job searching journey, building a support system. So I'm a big introvert. Here I am talking in front of people, but that's a different story. My point is, when things get hard, I tend to isolate, and I believe that like people don't care, or I need to think about it, or like so I just sit there by myself, pretty much boiling those thoughts inside my head. And that actually does the opposite of what I intend to do with it. So no matter where you're at, and no matter whether you are that shy person who is not really comfortable interacting with people, or that super outgoing person, we all need a support system. It's just that the support system will be different for every single one of us, and that's okay. That's what's supposed to happen. But you do need a support system. People who see you differently from how you see yourself. People who want you to grow, even if that takes them challenging your biggest assumptions and your biggest passions and saying, are you sure your resume looks good? Or are you sure this is your target audience for this type of product or this type of service? So sometimes it takes that harsh truth also to help us grow. That's why we all need a support system, people we can rely on and resources that we can rely on. Luckily, when it comes to the world of startups specifically, or the tech sector for that matter, Calgary stepped up big time in the recent years and is on track to do incredibly well in terms of developing the tech sector. So as you can see here, Calgary did dominate the 2023 Companies to Watch list published by Deloitte, which I personally find pretty incredible considering how many other opportunities exist in different parts of the country, all the different resources, all the different talents, and yet Calgary is doing incredibly well. And to be honest with you, I'm super proud and pumped to work in the center of that tech ecosystem in Calgary. So, for those of you who are considering working for a startup or building a startup, I highly encourage you to take advantage of one of the many, many resources that exist in the Calgary ecosystem. And it's a workshop called Startup 101 that we host here at Platform Calgary, but we do it virtually. So you literally can do that from the comfort of your own home. Again, this is not the right workshop if you're already, 10 years into building your own business. Potentially that might be a little bit not advanced enough for you. But if you're just starting out, I would highly encourage you to attend. The upcoming one is January 10th. We're talking about understanding startup culture, how to articulate and pitch your idea, because a lot of the times, again, it's not the idea that sucks, it's the communication around that idea that sucks. So we need to understand how to actually pitch that. And obviously, you will start navigating the awesome, resourceful Calgary startup ecosystem. And after we're done with today, there are some handouts right here, and there is a promo code. So honestly, this workshop by itself is $15 for 3 hours of interactive activity and knowledge and all of that, and peer-to-peer learning. So I think that's like more than fair. But you will also get a discount based on this handout here. So if you decide to join, I would love to see you there. I'm one of the people facilitating this workshop. Great resource if you want to ever work for a startup, build a startup, maybe one day create a startup. This will pretty much be your reality check for that. The next step for testing your idea would be to actually talk to your customers. And that's what we call the customer discovery process. So for that, Platform Calgary runs another program which is called Discover. And it's a 4-week virtual program where, again, you get homework, you get actual tasks to progress every single week. And that is how you validate your business idea and start building the actual solution. You master the instrument and the approach that uses the linear canvas, which is something that if you ever take your idea far enough to actually ask for funding, that would be the main instrument to do that. So everybody would ask you for that thing that includes certain elements, how they assess actually whether your startup is worth investing into. And if you ever get to a point where you're building a startup and you're thinking, okay, everything is right, I just need some money. If only I had more money, this would be amazing. Go do this. I promise you, the problem is not the money. The money comes after you know how to actually plan your startup, how to actually build and validate your solution. And then people are happy, honestly, happy to invest and provide some funds for people who are doing business and building startups in a smart mindset and actually challenging their own blind spots. So if you're interested, the QR code is there. The start date, January 22nd. It's run one time per week, and it's on a Monday night from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. So if you are employed or you have better things to do throughout the day, this is run in the evenings specifically for that. Another great resource is a pan-provincial startup support program that is called Alberta Catalyzer. So that is the pan-provincial program that Platform Calgary runs in collaboration with Alberta Innovates and Edmonton Unlimited. And it includes 3 different streams depending on where your startup's at. I'm not going to go into too much detail just based off of like the vibe that we're having today and that not so many people are actually building a startup. But if you want to know a little bit more about the experience of Alberta Catalyzer, Debbie will be happy. I'm like, I keep referring people to you, sorry. Or maybe not sorry, so I don't know. Anyway, so Debbie actually was in one of the streams that is called Traction. So if you're ever interested, first-hand experience, she'll tell you the truth and only truth about what it actually is about. Also, if you create a startup and you happen to incorporate that, so you actually create a company, and even if that company just has one employee who is you, but you are incorporated, and you're building a scalable tech solution, so again, a product-led type of business, then you can also take advantage of our platform membership, which is free for any organization within that scope that I just mentioned that has under 20 people employed in that, in their company. So with that, you get a whole bunch of other perks and resources. Again, I'm not going to dive too deep into that. The handouts are also here for some more information about the membership and Alberta Catalyzer and all of those resources. But I think what I really want to highlight to every single one of you is that as challenging as the startup journey may seem on your end, I promise you there are so many people and so many quality resources hungry to support you. We literally have sessions where we have more people representing support organizations and funds and things like that than we have quality startup founders, which tells us that if you have a great idea and you're smart about executing it, you will find support in the Calgary ecosystem and in the Calgary community. And platform obviously is a huge, huge part of that. We are sort of at the center of connecting people with resources. And if we are not the right place to advise you on something or provide some support, we definitely know someone who is. So we will definitely refer you or provide as many resources as we can. So when it comes to building a support system, as well as careers in tech, by the way, we have such a huge network of startups from the smallest to the biggest ones in Calgary that if they are ever hiring, guess where they come for information and referrals and insights and things like that and connections? They come to us as well. So there are Tech Talent Tuesdays, there are all these other events that like ridiculous number of events hosted at Platform every single month. So guess what? You can actually come out and attend those events, meet people there, tell them the 3 facts about you, get them to remember you because of your amazing wow fact that is unconventional and so cute and and then get a job in the right company. So that is also an option, and that is also what it means to build a support system. That means getting out of your comfort zone and actually building it versus sitting at home thinking that things are hard. Things are hard, 100%. But we cannot change that until we actually go and do something about it. So coming to events like today and all these other events that are hosted in the ecosystem, in the community, is the #1 step. Whether you're looking for a job or building a business, doesn't matter. You're meeting people every single time. Every single time is a chance for you to get new people to see you, understand you, hear your story, introduce you to someone who they know. All of those opportunities are available to you at any point in time, as mundane and routine as that may seem. And with that, I'm going to stop talking, and I want to leave some time for questions. So if you have any questions about anything that I shared today, or anything else related to job searching, Platform Calgary, Anything else? I'm here to answer any questions. So thank you. There is no perfect time to start a startup. But when it comes to, do you need to invent pretty much a new problem or take a stab at a problem that people haven't figured out yet? Or do you need, or can you just join the movement of people already resolving a problem? You could do both or either. Because even in certain sectors that seem very competitive, meaning that they already have a lot of alternatives to solve a certain issue or address a certain pain point, it does not mean that that pain point is being addressed in the most optimal and effective way. And by talking to people, so doing your customer discovery, you might actually realize that people are still not happy with the existing solutions, and they would love for someone like you to say, why do we need to do it this way? Like literally every single day, I evaluate startups that are building an app for managing personal finances. So imagine, every single day, there's at least one startup building an app like that. So the question is there a market for all of them? Yes. Because one person will trust you, the other person will trust someone else and say, no, you know what, your app, not so much, but this guy, yeah, he's doing it better. And then your customer will actually trust you based off of your expertise or your approach or your design or whatever, your features, or maybe just you as a person. You never know. So obviously it doesn't mean that every problem is worth solving, but every problem is worth testing and discovering. And then don't be discouraged if you see a lot of existing solutions. That does not mean that there is no space for your solution. And oftentimes, taking a stab or being the first person who, addresses a certain problem is actually even more challenging because you have no one to learn from. Learning from your competitors is such a blessing. I mean, obviously they're your competitors, so you also need to be better than them at certain something. But learning from them is a huge head start. So use that to your advantage. Okay, so basically, what's the best way to communicate your value to a startup? Okay, great question. I think it depends on the people you're dealing with. So obviously, if you get a chance to present some visual information, in certain cases, in a lot of cases, that might help if you're dealing with a very visual person. So for example, to me, you could explain something to me 5 times, but if I see it once, it's just there, it just stays, it never goes away. For other people, it might be the other way around. They don't like to view things visually, but they prefer something else. But I think the most important aspect of your question actually has to do with how do you market what you bring to the table, and basically the concept of selling yourself as a talent, as a set of skills, as a person that comes with a certain value. So there are essentially 3 steps to that. First is understanding what it is you do. Then it's understanding how you do it, and then it's understanding who benefits from that. So it even it's ridiculous how well it applies to even a bullet point on your resume. So if you have a bullet point that says managed phone calls, thousands of people can manage phone calls. I can manage phone calls. Tim can manage phone calls. You can manage phone calls. What makes you different? But when I see managed up to 150 calls per day while collaborating with the marketing team to boost the return ratio to whatever, to 1/3 of the company average, then I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting, because now I know what you did, managed phone calls. I know how well you did it, 150 per day, hello, and the return ratio that was a result of that, and who you collaborated with as well. So if I have a marketing team, I'm like, yeah, they're going to get along. And I also know who benefits from that. So my return ratio dropped, for example. So people stopped returning products to me, which improves my cash flow health as the business. So that's the difference between just describing yourself versus selling yourself. How you convey that, you could convey that in a resume, you could convey that with a slide deck, you could convey that in a conversation. I think that's secondary. What matters is that all of those aspects need to be communicated somehow. And how, that's totally up to you. Perhaps you're better at one way of communication, but someone else is better at another, and that's okay. Okay, well, if you're in that basic research phase, then all you need to test right now is the validity of the problem you're trying to solve. So hypothetically, if your app saves companies costs on cleaning, do companies want to save costs on cleaning? By how much? Are they saving those costs already? If they are, how are they doing that? Are they happy with how they're doing that? So that's just pretty much the standard process of customer discovery. When you start testing, that means that you already have at least a design. So let's say I am that company and I tell you, yes, I'm interested. You're like, hey, can I show you this design? Do you like this? Would you use this? What would you change about it? And I'm like, hey, I think that it's actually user-friendly. I like the dashboard, but I hate this button. Like, why is it here? So that's testing of like the very first super minimum prototype of your app. Then when you actually build it, like incorporating those recommendations, then you come back to me and you say, hey, remember, you helped me improve my product, so here it is. Would you test it for 10 weeks? And in the meantime, I'm here to support you with XYZ, and you give me feedback. But it really depends on the stage where you're at. So when you have a product, there is one way to test it. When you have a prototype of a product or a landing page describing that product is another type of test. But even when you're gathering, so let's say your app is in development, and you're gathering a wait list of people who would be interested to try it as soon as it launches. That is your test for validating that that problem is big enough, or the value proposition of your app is strong enough for people to potentially pay for it at some point. But if you have 5 people on the wait list after talking to 5,000, that's your test telling you something's not right. But the opposite, if you talk to 50 people and 48 signed up and said, yes, the minute you launched, I'm here. Then you're like, whoa, the market is actually bigger than I expected, maybe. So it really depends on the stage. But oftentimes, it's about showing people either an MVP or a design or a prototype or a website, or just communicating your value proposition and seeing whether any call to action will be executed based off of that. And maybe your call to action could also be adjusted. Maybe they don't want a wait list, but they want something else. So all of that is testing, essentially.